Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. This week is a follow-up of last week's episode, which I covered unhealthy communication habits that you need to look out for. So I listed 5 habits that a lot of people tend to do when they communicate with their spouse, especially when they're upset. And so if you haven't caught that yet, go back, hit pause on this one, catch episode 70 so that you can take a deeper dive into what those 5 things are, what they sound like, and then come back and listen to this, okay? So, as a follow-up for the last episode, I thought that it would be great to cover the healthy habits that you can replace those unhealthy habits with. Because habits are just things that we have done over and over and again and have solidified into something that we naturally normally do, almost like instinctive. And so if we don't know what to replace it with, it's really hard to know what to do instead. And in those moments where we feel very emotional, whether you're really frustrated or disappointed or angry or enraged, you're not going to be thinking as logically as you normally would because you are flooded with emotions. And so you're going to fall back on your habits, what comes naturally to you. And so, if you are wanting to move away from those unhealthy communication habits that you've picked up along the way, whether it's from your mom, from your dad, from another caretaker, from you developing it in response to a former or current partner, you're going to want to start shifting towards these replacement habits because you're going to notice that they yield a much, much better result and response from your partner. And as you practice doing these things, it's going to get easier and you're going to solidify it as a new habit. But the best way to learn something is not in the moment. It's before, so that when you're in the moment, you have 2 options to choose from. Do I want to be the old version of me that does the blaming, does the criticizing, that gets defensive, that is insulting and disrespectful, or makes assumptions? Or do I want to do these other alternatives and see what happens and open up the conversation to an opportunity to connect, to be able to actually resolve conflict instead of feeling like nothing I do is working. And I guess I'm just going to have to sweep it under the rug, accept that it is what it is, move on, only to then experience the same conversation or same argument, different flavor again, right? Like that is exactly what I don't want you to have to deal with, which is to feel like you have this recurring argument over and over and over again, but you're showing up with the same approaches every single time. And what do they say about doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? That is the definition of insanity, right? So let's not be insane. Instead, let's equip ourselves with more knowledge, with more options, so that we can start to change and evolve the way that we communicate with our partners and create a pathway to more open communication, to more partnership, to more connection, and less of the drama and the not so fun parts of marriage. So, habits like brushing your teeth in the morning or putting our dishes in the sink after we eat, right? So, like all of these things that we do are habits. Habits by nature are good, right? Like we have habits because if we had to think through every single thing that we did every single day, that would be very mentally draining. And so habits are our brain's way of doing life efficiently. And so as we do things over and over and over again with repetition, it becomes easier to almost do it with autopilot, with less thought and more ease, right? But depending on the type of habits that we're picking up, they could be healthy or unhealthy. So, in the realm of communication habits, the habits that you're picking up come from most likely your parents or whoever you were taken care by growing up. So, whatever you witnessed and experienced are things that you took in, and maybe you're like, I'm going to repeat this, or I'm not going to do that. And sometimes it's not a choice. Sometimes you have those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm turning into my mother, right? I have so many of those moments. And it's good to recognize, okay, what are my communication habits? What are the ones that I like? What are the ones that I don't like? And of the ones that I don't like, what can I do about them? Right? So today is all about understanding our alternatives so that we can more intentionally choose in the moment and give ourselves options, right? Because in the moment, when you're upset, you're not going to be thinking clearly, right? If you do, that's incredible. Most of us don't, myself included. But in the moment, we're not going to be like, I wonder, right? Especially if you don't have the options available to you. If you don't know what else can I do in this situation to still get my needs met. So I'm hoping from this, you're going to learn what other options you have to still get your needs met so that in the face of conflict, the next time you're going to be like, oh, I can do what I used to do, and you can run it through your mind like, oh, that's how it's going to play out. And I don't like that, right? Whether it's going to create defensiveness from your partner or a lot of back and forth or more anger, more drama or unresolved issues, right? Or be like, let me experiment with this other option that I have and see where it takes me and continue to tweak it and fine tune it so you can develop a new habit that you've done so through repetition and be able to kick the other one to the curb and be like, this is my new way of communicating, and then open your marriage up to more open communication, one that is more collaborative instead of full of drama. Okay, so that's what we're going to be covering today. I'm very excited about this because this is stuff that I didn't grow up learning. I very much had to fumble my way through communication in relationships and study communication to finally be like, oh, these are way better ways to go about being understood, understanding the other person, and forming a stronger connection with that person instead of feeling like we're at odds and I'm never going to feel understood or we're always going to argue like this. And instead of spending that time where we're having fun together, actually enjoying each other, you're feeling like there's this tension that just never goes away, or if it does, it quickly comes back. Okay, that's what we want to avoid because that is not the pathway to success in your marriage. And so today we're going to talk about that in respect to, okay, what are these 5 unhealthy habits and what can we do instead? All right, so the first habit that we talked about in the last one was blaming, right? I am a former blamer. This is just like my natural instinct to just blame the other person for doing something that upset me, right? It's very much like victim mentality. Okay. Now, when you feel like you want to blame your partner for something, that's because there's something inside of you that isn't sitting right. And so when we are not accustomed to being able to handle our emotions with more ease and empathy and acknowledgement, and we don't know what to do with it, the natural tendency is to push it onto the person that we think caused it, right? But if you've been here for a while, you know that no one can make us feel a certain way. How we feel is a result of what's going on inside of our head. Okay? They might have done something, but our narrative of what that thing was and what it meant to us and how it affects us and all the meaning and assumptions that we are building in our head in a matter of like 2 seconds, maybe even 2 milliseconds, is what causes the feeling. So it's this like jumbled translator that's going on inside of our brains that's creating the feeling. So anytime you feel like you want to point the finger because you're upset, the best thing for you to do is to actually take personal responsibility. So instead of playing the victim card, take personal responsibility. Now, if you're new to this phrase, you might wonder, what the hell does personal responsibility mean? I didn't do what they did, so how can I possibly take responsibility? Why would I do that? Why would I let them off the hook? That is not what taking personal responsibility is about. It's not about letting them off the hook. It's about doing what you can in your power to facilitate a better conversation, one where he actually wants to stick around and listen and continue the conversation, one where he doesn't feel like he needs to put his walls up and get defensive or walk away. Okay? So taking personal responsibility, while it can feel challenging when you're not used to it. I mean, hell, it still can feel challenging depending on the degree of the conversation that's happening. It could feel really raw and really vulnerable to face yourself in the mirror and be like, oh, okay. So taking responsibility over yourself means taking a look at how you got into this situation in the first place. How did you personally contribute towards your experience? Okay. Now I want to add this caveat. Okay. This does not pertain to you in a situation where there is abuse going on. Okay. I'm just going to put that out there because this is not relevant to that conversation. This is about a situation where you're having a tiff, a conflict with your partner, okay? Not you being in a situation where you're actually being physically or verbally harmed or emotionally harmed or even financially harmed, because there is no victim mentality right there, okay? If that's you, please go get help. But for the sake of this conversation, this is about anything but abusive situations, okay? Okay, so taking personal responsibility looks like, let's say you are getting ready for a trip, okay? And you see your husband just sitting there doing nothing. And meanwhile, you are acting like a chicken with its head cut off, running around like crazy, trying to do all the things to pack, to get snacks ready in the car, to figure out the itinerary, and you're just like, your head is going to explode, right? And you can use this with events too, or anything like that. What's easy to do is just be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so stressed because you're not fill in the blank, because you're not helping, you're not da-da-da. Like, we're all familiar with what blaming sounds like, okay? Personal responsibility in this situation looks like, how did I get to the point where I am so overwhelmed, so burnt out, that I am snapping at my husband when I see him sit on the couch? Okay? So in that situation, for me personally, it would be, I never sat down to talk to him about how this is all going to go. And I never sat down and talked to him about, hey, this is what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? Or this is what I need you to do, and delegate. Okay? Or, hey, this is what I don't want to happen. Or this is what we need to do as a team to make this happen. Okay? So a lot of times blaming can be cured through communication. So by me taking personal responsibility and saying, well, he's sinning because he thinks that I have it. Like, I've got it down. I am doing everything. I didn't communicate that he needs to be a part of this. I didn't communicate that I needed any sort of support or help. I didn't sit down with him to like really lay out the plan so that he knows his part and I could play my part and he can play his part. And instead, I'm just blaming him for how I feel when really the vacation and how I wanted to go was my idea, my doing to myself. I made it more complicated than I needed to, and I took on more than I can actually handle. So I wasn't being honest about my own personal bandwidth. Or maybe I didn't plan well enough and I didn't do things ahead of time enough to prevent this from happening. Okay, you see the change there? There are always things that we are doing that are contributing to the situation. And this is true for arguments as well. If you're like, you made me feel stressed, pissed off, sad, alone, whatever, right? We want to refrain from using that phrase, the you made me, or even just you in general, because you has like a very like pointy finger kind of connotation, right? And instead understand like, okay, well, did I react in a defensive way to like create this back and forth? Did I talk over him? What did I do that I can claim and take responsibility over that may have influenced how he's responding to me? Okay, that's what personal responsibility looks like. It's making yourself exempt from being free of any source of like improvement, and it takes yourself off of that pedestal of, well, I'm mad, which means that you're the person that did something wrong. It's more of, I'm feeling mad and there is something wrong here. Okay, hopefully you can see the difference there. Now, the second one I had shared was criticizing. Oh, this is a big one, right? Like, taking the same example, if you see your husband sitting down and you're like handling dinner, handling the kids, and you're just like, what the hell? And you're like, gosh, can't you just get your lazy butt off the couch and be more helpful? Why can't you be as supportive as blank's husband? Or anything like that. Anything that puts your partner down or labels them or judges them for the decisions that they're making, for not meeting your expectations. Okay? In this situation, this is very much, again, your cry for help, your cry for something to change because you're not getting a need met. Your expectation probably wasn't communicated, which is why it's not being met. Because how can a need be met if we are not communicating it, right? So in this situation, what's best for you to do is to share what your needs are and how you're feeling so that you can actually work as a team to figure out what the next steps are. Because if you criticize, I assure you, they're not going to respond favorably. They're going to respond very much negatively. Like, if you just turn the tables around and think back to whenever you're criticized, do you listen to that and like open your arms up and be like, okay, let me see how I can help you? Probably not. You're probably like, oh, funny how you're saying that to me. And then you're gonna flip it back on them, right? You're gonna be like, well, how dare you call me not helpful? When was the last time you blah, 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 right? And then it becomes like this competition of who's more or less of something. And then that steps away from the actual conversation that needs to be had, rather than talking about what the actual issue is so that you can resolve it as a team, right? We want to prevent that back and forth, that unnecessary drama, and just cut straight into what's the problem here. Let's figure out what that problem is and address it as a team. Okay? That is not a great way to get their support, to get their love, to get their sympathy, whatever it is that you are wanting, right? So instead of criticizing, be more clear. And of course, like, take personal responsibility. If you're at the point where you're like, oh, this is a little late, right? It's okay. You can still take a break from being upset and notice, like, oh crap, I wasn't clear. And then just say it right then and there. Just almost like taking a clean slate and be like, my bad. Didn't mean to snap at you, but I'm noticing that I'm getting really overwhelmed, and it's my fault that I didn't actually let you in on the actual plan so that you knew how to step in and be there for me. And instead, I am like yelling at you for not being there for me. So here's what's going to happen, right? Like, that is never going to be too late for you to take a time out, to pivot, and get on the same page again, okay? And then the third unhealthy communication habit that I shared last week was getting defensive. Oh my gosh, this is so common, so easy, so almost like natural to do whenever we feel attacked. And feeling attacked could even sometimes not even sound like an attack, but it's, again, the meaning that we are deriving from what they're saying, right? Or making assumptions about what they mean by it. And then we have our own feelings about it, depending on how often we've heard it or how often we've thought it about ourselves. So if this is something that you have been doing, right? Getting defensive, especially when your partner's like offering feedback, or maybe what they're saying isn't so nice. This is maybe one of the last things you might want to do, but it could be the most helpful thing for you to do if your goal in your conversations is to actually make it more productive and more successful, okay? And that is, be an active listener. Now, I get it. You're probably like, why the hell would I want to listen to someone if they're attacking me, right? But again, remember, how we perceive attacks could very well not actually be intended as an attack. It could be a poor choice of words. It could be us perceiving it incorrectly. But if we were to actually take apart the sentence that's used and actually listen to it objectively, we might be like, actually, there's nothing mean about what they said, but I don't like what it's showing me about me. I don't like what's being pointed out in me, right? Everything is a reflection of ourselves. So how we react is very much a reflection of something going on inside of us. And it's our job to investigate that. Okay? So to be an active listener, especially in the face of conflict, might require you to ground yourself, right? Taking deep breaths, noticing if you're getting really tense and your anger is starting to build up, or your heart's starting to race and you're like, oh my God, I really just want to wring your neck, or like, I want to say something back at you because you're just throwing a pile of poop in my face and I just want to do it back to you tenfold, right? Notice what's going on inside of your body. Ground yourself. Take a break if you need. And do your best to listen to understand what they're actually trying to say. Okay? Not everyone is a great communicator. Everybody is on their own path. Some people are amazing communicators. Some are still finding their way. And so sometimes we have to read between the lines so that we can kind of like dissect what is it that they're trying to say, right? What is the point of what they're saying to me? What do they want me to understand from what they're saying? Sometimes we can't take things literally because it can cause more drama, conflict, you name it, right? And so instead, try and investigate, what is it that they're trying to say to me? Kind of like when our toddlers are first starting to communicate and we're like, what the hell did you just say? It's just like a bunch of gibberish, right? But as you start to spend more time with them and ask questions and understand them on a deeper level, it's easier to get what they're saying. And the same goes for your partner, right? Don't just give up. If you notice, wow, what you said just pissed me off, notice it and ask questions to clarify. Or if you're like, wow, I really don't understand what they're saying, they're talking in circles, see if you can pick up some themes about what they're saying. What do they keep saying over and over and over again? And if you're confused about what they mean by that, ask, right? Ask questions to better understand what it is that they're trying to say. And with that said, if they are attacking you, maybe it's time to set some boundaries. You do not need to get on the roller coaster with them. If they're upset and they feel like the best thing for them to do at that moment is to hurl insults at you or hurl attacks at you and point out how you're not the best and how dare you criticize them or bring up the past or whatever is in their normal toolkit when it comes to communicating and deflecting, you don't have to join them on that ride, okay? You can set boundaries so that it's clear what you're willing to stay in the conversation for and what you're not willing to stay in the conversation for. So if the conversation starts to get out of hand and you feel personally attacked and it's not productive anymore, let them know, hey, I think we need to take a time out. This doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere. And I think it'd be good for us to take a break with this conversation and then come back together when we are feeling calmer so that we can get through this better. Or, hey, please don't talk about the past, right? Or, okay, I got it. That part bothered you. And then redirect them, right? Redirect them to talk about something that will help move the conversation forward. Because if they're talking in circles, you don't need to be talked at and have the same thing brought up over and over and over again. So if they've brought up their point, you get it, and you've demonstrated that you get it, then help them move on from it, okay? The next one is disrespecting your partner, like rolling your eyes, mocking them, insulting them, anything that puts them down, being condescending, being passive aggressive, using sarcasm, but not in a playful way, right? None of that is good. If that's something that you're resorting to when you're angry, check in with your anger, okay? Check in with your anger, because I'm betting that you wouldn't do that if you felt fine, right? In a normal circumstance, when you're communicating with your partner, you probably don't talk to them like that. But it's when you get pushed over the edge that side of you comes out. And that side of you is probably something that you don't feel very good about, right? So in these situations, it's good to get curious and check in with your anger. Why am I this angry? What is the root of what's going on, right? Investigate your thoughts, your feelings, and understand what it is that you are needing so that instead of reacting like you normally do, pulling your eyes, whatever, you can articulate what's upsetting you with personal responsibility, right? And then work through things together and keep the conversation flowing in a productive direction where you're actually working together as a team to solve the issue instead of fighting each other. Okay? And then the last one was assuming. We talked a little bit about this already. Very easy to do. We don't even know that we're doing it half the time. But the answer to this, the alternative to assuming, is to get curious. Like, I don't know about you, but like anytime there's been a misunderstanding about me, I don't like it. I don't like to be mislabeled, misjudged, misunderstood. I would much rather someone formulate an opinion about me based on conversation, right? Based on getting to know me instead of just using information they have and then making a decision. So instead of making assumptions, ask clarifying questions like, what did you mean by that? What you just said, this is what I heard. Is that what you meant for me to hear? Okay? Because if you check in with who do I think this person is versus who am I talking to right now, and you're feeling shocked by what you're hearing, there's likely a misunderstanding going on. There's likely a misperception on your behalf and a miscommunication on their behalf. And something is not right here. Something is getting lost in translation. So in those moments, it's good to just take a time out and be like, pretty sure that he's not saying what I think he's saying, because that would be awful. Like, I could never see him saying something like that, but this is what's coming through to me. So let me check in, right? So you're giving him the benefit of the doubt by asking clarifying questions, and you're giving him an opportunity to actually be heard. By doing this, you are giving him the chance to actually share what he's needing to share. And you're showing that you care about what he's trying to say. Everybody wants to feel understood. So this is a perfect way to do that for your partner. Okay? Because our brains do a lot of interesting things with information. And so anytime you feel like, that's off, ask, right? Ask questions and let yourself make sense of the situation based on actual clear information, things that you have validated, rather than information that your brain's just like, oh, I see a gap, let me just fill it in with something that happened in the past, like a previous relationship or like a previous fight, right? Because you and your partner are constantly changing. We're constantly experiencing different things in life, right? And we are growing and we are changing and we are evolving. And so if something is striking a nerve and you're like, that is not sitting right, do yourself and your marriage a favor and not stop there and take that information and run with it. Instead, call a timeout and be like, whoa, red flag. This is what I heard. Is that what you meant for me to hear? So that they can then either, change how they're saying it, because it could be that they don't realize that that's how it's coming off, right? And then correct what they're saying so that you can better understand exactly what it is that they're trying to articulate. Okay? So those are some great habits for you to instill in your communication style with your partner to be able to use conflict as a catalyst to form a deeper connection, to form more emotional intimacy with each other. It's doing those unhealthy habits that's keeping you stuck in the back and forth, in the feeling like you're not on the same page and feeling like you can't work together as a team and that you guys are just at odds and you guys are just going to argue the same way over and over and over again. Well, yeah, because if you don't do anything differently, that's what's going to happen, right? So take a look at what are the unhealthy habits that you have in your communication and start to chip away at them little by little with these replacement habits and see what it does for you. And if you do actually try it, let me know how it goes for you, okay? I would love to hear what happens as a result of you changing how you're communicating and how your partner starts to respond differently as you are doing things that are actually helping you get closer to open communication, to deeper connection, to more partnership, and actually be able to resolve problems together as a team instead of feeling like you are all alone and unsupported. Okay. Well, that's all I have for today. If this is something that you're struggling with and you want to learn more about, like, what are the different approaches that I can start to use to replace the unhealthy and toxic communication habits that I have? If this is you and you want to improve your toolkit with things that actually work, so that you can spend more time enjoying your marriage, enjoying your life, and feeling like partners, then we can either work together privately, or I can point you to my online course called Marriage Communication Essentials. Okay. And that's where you get to learn the framework that I teach all my private clients that are struggling with communication so that they can start to experience fights that are shorter, less intense, and start to have more deep conversations and feel closer to their person. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you back here next week. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. I would so appreciate that. And if you love what I share here, then you're going to love and want to join my free private Facebook community that's also called Marriage and Motherhood. I hope to see and connect with you in there. Otherwise, I'll catch you back here next week for the next episode. Bye.